Yeah. The other day, I was on a walk with a friend, and we were talking about, the fact that he does union organizing, and really the details of the conversation aren't relevant. It's more or less just an anecdote, but it made me remember a thought that I had a long time ago. Um, we were talking about something, and we were walking under a tree, and something whacked into his head that came must have been on the tree, probably some sort of well, we don't know what it was. Something whacked his head, and then he turns to me and asks, why did that happen? Why did this thing whack me in the head? And what does that mean? And is the universe telling me something? And is it telling me that we should not be talking about this? That I shouldn't be thinking that thought? You know, and people turn to religion and spirituality and tarot and astrology and any number of other, you know, spiritual forms of spirituality, and forms of a kind of existential spirituality. And they'll experience things that, they claim are, truly not random, that they'll have an experience that seems very unrandom to them, that seems to have a meaning conveyed by it. And, people experience stuff like this all the time, and it's, and it causes them to question, whether there is a meaning behind events that relates specifically to them and communicates specifically to them. And, you know, humans have been doing this since the very beginning, since the beginning of human thought. Humans have been doing this, believing that events were some sort of, you know, uh, brought about by the gods or by spirits, and events relate to humans specifically, and those events speak to us, from some higher place, and there's some sort of spirit or intentionality behind them or meaning. And humans have been doing this, since the very beginning. I mean, we used to think that it was rational for us at that time, to look at an exploding volcano, or a thunderstorm, or a tsunami, and to think, wow, I mean, why did that happen? That's horrible. So many people were injured or killed by it. What does that mean? Did we do something wrong? And then, not far from that line of thinking is, okay, well, we're going to have to do something to appease the spirit or the intentionality behind this so that we can stop these horrible things from happening. And, I can easily prove that that's an invalid way of thinking. I'll go out and do a tornado, right? Or go out to a storm or a tornado or any other natural, you know, event like that. And that possesses a kind of potential for danger, and I can sacrifice a lamb to it, and I'll tell you that's not going to stop the tornado, and it's not going to stop the rain, and it's not going to bring rain, and it's not, it's not going to. I can very easily prove that, and correlation, isn't causation, and we didn't really have that insight till much later. That's more of a post Enlightenment way of thinking, and I think it's called the Enlightenment for a reason. But regardless, it wasn't irrational for us, for early humans, to think, wow, the earth is alive, and there's something behind it all that speaks to us individually. It's got a message in it of some kind. And it's natural for us to assume that if we're conscious, then other things are conscious, and if we have intentions, then there are intentions behind other things, and we extrapolate in that way and project our own consciousness onto the material world. And you know it's not it wasn't irrational for humans to do that at an early point. We didn't really have anything to go on. We just started thinking existentially, and thinking about purpose, and thinking about meaning, and so it may have been natural for us to do that. So in any case, um, people have these experiences of a kind of spiritual unrandomness, and that causes them to turn inward and introspect about the meaning of things and whether there is a meaning and how it relates to me and what my purpose is and yada yada yada, right? And I'm not deriding that way of thinking, and I've been a victim of it in the past as well. But I my friend, right, this thing whacks into his head at random, and or at least I suppose that it was random, and he begins to speculate about engaging in very human cognition. What does that mean? What is how does that speak to me, and what does that mean? And I had a thought a while back because religious people will often have these experiences they use to then support their religious belief, and I believe a lot of it has to do with confirmation bias. We look at the things that confirm the belief, and we take those in, and then we reject the things that negate the belief, um, and to preserve the belief. And you know, I can't say anything. So what? But the question I asked him, the question that the point that arose to me in the past was this: you not only have to consider the moment at which this, and again, it's an anecdote. I'm drawing on the details of an anecdote. You're going to have to just go with that, right? Hopefully, you were here from the beginning, or you can watch the video in playback and get the details of what I'm saying. Um, the anecdote that I'm speaking about, because I don't want to have to reiterate it over and over again for people to come on um, at random. And you know, I asked him, or at least I didn't ask him. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. Um, you have to consider all of the days on which that rock did not whack into your head, right? I mean, how many days have you lived that that did not happen? And um, that's the important thing there, right? I mean, he focuses, he narrows inward on something he's experiencing in the present moment, and then attributing a meaning to that of some kind, or at least speculating about its meaning. And he neglects to consider all of the days and all of the hours and all of the minutes that came before where that rock did not, or I'm calling it a rock. I mean, for him, it felt like a rock. So we'll call it a rock, whatever object it was. You have to consider all of the days, all the moments, all the minutes where that did not slam into your head. And so, we all lapse into that kind of thinking. What does it mean? And how does this event relate to me? And it's all a part of almost the self-centeredness of our own consciousness. And, it's, we- you know, and, the term I used with him was kind of the narcissism of our own consciousness, is thinking that, these external events convey something specific to me or specific to my understanding. And it's a presumption, it's an assumption that we make about things. And ultimately, I really have to be a deterrent against his way of thinking and that way of thinking, because I think it's an extremely dangerous way of thinking if an individual is not firmly sane. And it's a very short ride to psychosis from having beginning to speculate about the meaning behind random events. And you know that's a danger. And I think that we don't, just because we can understand and just because we can speculate about the meaning of things, it doesn't give us a license to. And we have to recognize confirmation bias, and we have to recognize that there's an inherent self-centeredness to the way that we think. And that may as well be inescapable in many cases, and for most people, if not all people. So all that I'm saying is that the question he needs to ask himself, that I've asked myself in the past, is consider all the days that that rock did not whack into your head, all the hours, all the months, all the years that that rock did not whack into your head. And you quickly realize, oh, it probably is random, because it's only happened once in my life, in my experience. That's only happened on one occasion. And hence, it's more probable via that logic that it was simply a random occurrence. And I don't want to take anyone's beliefs away, and I definitely am not. I'm not trying to spread nihilism, and I'm not trying to spread. I'm not trying to kill meaning in any way. I'm simply encouraging maybe people to be a bit more skeptical about how they attempt to derive meaning from their experiences, and to note bias and to be very conscious of the bias when trying to interpret things. And you know, it's fine. It's fine for the occasional indulgence of self-discovery, wanting to do the astrology thing, and wanting to interpret things in this way. And it's up to an individual. It's an individual's right? I mean, to interpret things as they will, but it's just you know and I firmly believe that there is the freedom of belief and thought and all of that, and the freedom of thought includes the freedom to think bad thoughts and to think invalid thoughts, and you know so and that's a necessary. So the thing is that we should just simply check the impulse to interpret events with a kind of a narrow-mindedness and a kind of the narcissism of, oh well, this relates specifically to me and I'm at the center of it all. And this, for instance, this rock whacking into my head is a message to me. Again, I would challenge you to think about, and we could extend that to any number of concrete examples where this can happen. I mean, let's say that there's some movement in your life that is fortuitous and somewhat miraculous. You really have to be skeptical about considering the whole of your life experience and all of time, and embracing a bigger picture kind of perspective about things, and then asking yourself, oh, okay, you know, you know, uh, on every other occasion this did not happen, and I'm simply then going to interpret that this situation is somehow special. This one unique localized situation refers to me, relates to me, is special to me, is meaningful to me, and that does not take into account all of the days, all of the hours, all of the months where this miraculous event did not occur. And so we have to be very skeptical of our impulse to want to confirm a something that we want to be true, because we all do that, and ultimately there's a certain amount of maybe even delusion that may be necessary to survive. I mean, but that's not a license to simply give free rein to the impulse to speculate and interpret things with that, with from perspective of total self-centeredness, and not to consider you know standards of evidence, and embrace a bigger, more rational perspective about one's life and all of history and time. And in any case, that's more of a hoity-toity way of saying, I mean, with respect to the anecdote that I led with my friend, consider all the days that rock did not slam into your head, and you know, take those into account, because it makes it way more probable that that event was just simply random. And you know, I can't say with absolute certainty that it's random. Um, but I think that it's, and it really depends on how an individual, what they choose to believe with respect to events that have a kind of spiritual unrandomness to them. Um, you know, it's ultimately up to the individual to decide what to believe in that particular context based on the anecdotal evidence they have. But it's only to say that for example, I mean, we have to think about the we have to think, okay, well, what would be the danger of interpreting something in this way? And it's that that kind of thinking could very easily, right, not considering bias and you know, very easily leads into kind of delusory thinking. And so, we have to determine, we have to be very skeptical of these types of occurrences. And, to me, anyway, this thinking is at the core of what supports religious belief and many forms of spirituality. And, you know, um, and, you know, it's just important for us to maintain our skepticism and try to get beyond the self-centeredness of our own perspective and our own thinking and try to embrace a larger, more rational context and, you know, and the totality of the evidence, right? I mean, uh, this is the confirmation bias issue. I mean, we're oftentimes just trying to support something that we want to believe is true. But, you know, that's a very understandable impulse in the face of life. Um, but it still needs to be restrained by a deliberative process. And, it, you know, so yeah. And as I said, I mean, that kind of thinking is a very short ride. It's a very short train ride to psychosis. And, you know, that's an inherent danger to me, both to the individual and and to society. And so, to me, it's very important to, at a very early age, start to encourage these, critical thinking practices, um, because otherwise we don't really have any cognitive defense against delusion, and it's desperately necessary for people to have at least some foundation in these critical thinking skills so that you know they can protect not only their own sanity and safety but the very interconnected the stability and the the ultimate good of the network, the social network in which they operate. And I just there's a reason that we recognize that psychosis is clinically, at least within the fields of psychology, you know it's not something to be identified with, and it's something that can very easily be propagated by spiritualist thinking. Um, and so I'm not saying that it's so yeah, and of course, inevitably, we all do it. And I mean, well, we may not. I mean, most people I think do it. I mean, I fall into the trap regularly, but I at least try to recognize that there could be a role of bias here and my own self-centered perspective, and there could be other explanations for events, um, and that's just part of getting beyond one's own self-centered perspective, which, as I said, is very difficult, but at least somewhat doable. Um, I think for all people, it's totally doable, but it's just very important that we consider that we arrive at presumptions about the world, and those presumptions may ultimately help us to psychologically cope and to feel good, right? There's a huge hedonistic element to this. Um, I mean, there's an immense hedonistic element to this way of thinking, and you know, just have to be careful with the kind of rampant, uh, not to allow the impulse to seek that kind of meaning or those types of explanations for things. We have to be careful about countering that with a concern for objectivity, truth, facts, and evidence, and a more rational perspective. And for any given conclusion, I mean, it's just as likely that the opposite could be true. And so, we have to consider that. And ultimately it's an encouragement to be more deliberative and um, to try to find something, perhaps to find something better, or at least something a little bit more healthy in that way of thinking. Um, so yeah, that's really the only point that I wanted to make. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope that at least the fundamental point, which is that when you experience an event that you would consider spiritually unrandom, ask yourself, you know, consider all of the days, months, and years that that event did not happen, and embrace that broader context, and at least attempt to maybe get beyond the self-centeredness of confirmation bias and that type of spirituality, which is very aggressively fed by confirmation bias. And um, yeah, so and hence embracing that larger perspective about all the days in which the event did not occur, the this all of the days and the years that this spiritually significant and seemingly unrandom event occurred. um, yeah, yeah, so hopefully this is coherent. And as I asked to my friend, if you've been watching since the beginning, you know that what the story is I'm drawing on here, the personal anecdote. Um, Always, for any given kind of you know conclusion that you might arrive at, remember that it's just as likely that the opposite could be true. And when you experience a spiritually unrandom event, a seemingly, right, a highly spiritual and very seemingly unrandom event, challenge yourself to think about all of the days, weeks, and years before where this event did not occur. And by embracing that larger context, you recognize that it's more probable that the event was truly random. So yeah, thanks for watching.